Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. This is episode number 15. As always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. Today, we'll be breaking down the DC United game, a nice big road victory. But before that, how you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling fantastic, buddy. It's been one of the best weekends of football for me. Inter Miami won, Manchester United won. Couldn't ask for more. And yeah, buzzing to discuss the game last night.
Yeah, I think both of us are a little high on energy right now after watching that Manchester United Liverpool FA Cup uh, quarterfinal, and we're both on high after that. Um, let's do some quick hitters first and do some house cleaning because I want to spend most of this episode talking about the game. But first thing to talk about is Lionel Messi. He missed the game yesterday because of a precaution, something with his hamstring. We both thought it wasn't anything serious, but it turns out it might be a little bit more serious than we thought. There's some rumors that he's not going to be taking part in the Argentina camp this international break. Um, yeah, are you worried, or I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, until I heard the news yesterday, I wasn't as worried because I thought it was just a precaution and he was preparing himself for the Argentina game. But yesterday, the news came out that this is possibly a recurring hamstring injury that he might be dealing with, and he might take some time away from the next two games Argentina's playing to recover from that. A little bit worried because obviously at his age, you don't want an injury to extend itself too much. And there are important games coming up, and we want him to play, obviously. But after watching yesterday's game, one thing I liked was the fact that Inter Miami is looking really good even without Messi in the team. So I think if he has a bit of a spell on the sidelines, it'll be concerning, but I won't be too bothered by it because I think we have the tools and the personnel to get through those games.
Yeah, we're not going to talk too much about the Red Bull game next weekend on this podcast, but we're not going to have him regardless because he would be with the national team. We're going to be missing a few other players, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it feels like this game against DC and that game next week are going to be two road games against real MLS competition, and we have to get 3 points in both of them. And if we do, we should feel pretty good about this team even without Lionel Messi.
Yeah, and I think it would be a really good chance for some of the fringe players to show what they're capable of. We know there's a lot of potential in this team, and players like David Ruiz are going to get more minutes. Lawson Sunderland's probably going to get more minutes with Diego Gomez out. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good chance for those fringe players to showcase their abilities.
Yeah, so we don't have any definitive update on Lionel Messi, but we will be keeping our eyes open just because that is going to be a big storyline if it becomes a problem. Franco Negri sounds like he's back in full training starting on Monday. He'll be back fully fit, ready to go, and could be on the bench. I mean, he's probably not 90 minutes fit, but he's ready to be back in the team, and we could see him off the bench on Saturday against the Red Bulls.
Yeah, and he can fill up a couple of places. He can play fullbacks on either side if needed. I think obviously having him play in that left back position, we have Alba, we have Noah Allen, but Allen didn't look great yesterday. So I think having him come back and be another option, just strengthen the squad numbers is great. And can't wait to see him come back to full fitness soon.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna. Um, Let me put it this way: we've already seen Jordi Alba miss a couple games. Uh, one from just rotation, which I think is reasonable, but I think other than Messi and Suarez, I'm not sure how much rotation we thought there was going to be, and so for us to need that left back because Jordi Alba's not going to be able to play every game, it's really nice. And I also think this means we're probably not going to see Noah Allen play as a left back or left wing back if either of those two is available to start. Um, so yeah, that's the injury update. Negri is back with the team and should be available on next Saturday, assuming there's nothing going wrong this week. And then Lionel Messi wasn't going to be with the team over the next 2 weeks anyways, but sounds like he might be dealing with a more serious injury, and that's something to pay attention to. We're not sure if he's going to do his rehab with the national team or in Miami, which is a segue to talk about the international call-ups. The international break starts tomorrow morning or tonight, however you would like to think about it. And here is what I believe is an exhaustive list of players we're going to be losing. And that includes Messi, Robert Taylor's called up by Finland, David Ruiz by Honduras, Drake Callender by the U.S. men's national team, Federico Redondo by the Argentine under-23 Olympic team, and then Diego Gomez by the Paraguay national team. So that's 5 call-ups, maybe 6, depending on what happens with Messi, but 6 players that are going to be unavailable next week. Well, 5 depending on Drake Callender's situation, and maybe we can talk about that. But how are you feeling about going into our first international window where we're missing some players?
Yeah, I didn't realize David Ruiz has been called up as well. Good for him, first of all. But damn, that's like 5 starters, potential starters gone. So I think the game against Red Bull is going to be a difficult one in terms of just maintaining the momentum, because I think obviously there's going to be a lot of rotation. We're going to see some new faces. So it's going
Now
to be
that I
interesting.
mentioned that, wouldn't that make you feel a lot better about getting a win at the Red Bulls this weekend? Yeah,
Oh yeah,
without
for
not
sure.
just Messi, but several guys.
Oh, for
Not
sure.
not included in that list is Sergei Kristov. He was a Ukraine national team locked in call up for all of last season. Leo Campana, who's sort of a fringe player for Ecuador, didn't get called up. So nice to be able to keep both of them, especially with Frede potentially being injured. I don't think we have any update on him yet. But yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is Drake Callender. Last season, he was called up and he left the national team for a couple hours to fly to Miami's game, and then started for Inter Miami last season. So just the fact that he got called up for the national team doesn't mean he'll necessarily miss next weekend's game. We'll have to see, and that's probably something we'll learn about next Saturday. But he has done that before. He's going to be the third choice keeper for the national team this window, so he's not going to play for them anyways. So we'll see. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that Edison Ascona, who is on loan from Inter Miami at the Las Vegas Lights, did get an assist in the USL Championships opening weekend. Las Vegas Lights played their first game, and he got an assist. So I don't know if we're ever going to see him again in Inter Miami pink, but still good to see him for a homegrown player.
No, for sure.
Okay, let's get into the game. We get the lineup card about an hour before kickoff, and it's a 4-3-3, which we were surprised by, obviously. There was a lot more rotation than we were expecting. We knew that Messi wasn't going to play, but I don't think there was any reason for us to think Suarez and Jordi Alba weren't going to play. And so yeah, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the lineup, and how did that play out?
Both of us got the lineup completely wrong, or at least the formation. So that was an interesting start. I was not expecting the 4-3-3 to be back so soon without having a right back in place. And I think we both highlighted, I highlighted the wing back position or the full back position that would be a little bit of a issue in this setup with this personnel. You mentioned that Julian Gressel and the wing players, Robert Taylor and Julian Gressel on the two sides, are going to be important. And I think we got that analysis spot on, because the game started off with DC United on the front foot for at least the first 15 minutes. They dominated us a lot, and I'm sure we're going to go through the minute by minute highlights. But I think at the start of it, for the first 15 minutes, I was a little bit skeptical of whether we can maintain the 4-3-3 against this DC United team. And then Tata Martino obviously decided to make a switch in terms of tactics, and we saw a completely different version of the same 4-3-3 for the next 75 minutes or so. And it was really refreshing to see how fresh the players looked. It was really refreshing to see that everyone looked confident in their positions, barring a few errors here and there, obviously. But I think the 4-3-3 is definitely the way to go. And it was good to see that despite having an absence of a right back, we were able to play that 4-3-3 and do well with it after the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, we started the 4-3-3 for the first 3 games of the season before trading Yedlin. And when we did that, we had Jordi Alba at left back, Yedlin at right back. We had Messi up top. Gressel was in the midfield. So yesterday's game, even though we went back to the 4-3-3 for the first time, was a significantly different lineup. Obviously, Noah Allen and David Ruiz were the fullbacks, which is a significant, probably a drop off from Alba and DeAndre Yedlin. Gressel no longer in the midfield after Redondo has come in, and he was playing out wide on the right. And it didn't look great to start, and we'll get into that. But before that, I want to talk about this midfield, and if you think the fact that we've continued to go with these three, even in this game where we rotate a little bit, is indicative of this being our midfield three for the foreseeable future. And what does that mean for Julian Gressel?
Yeah, I think the three with Diego Gomez, Busquets, and Redondo are really hitting their stride in terms of chemistry and their sync and the way they're learning to play with one another. And they've looked good. I think ever since Redondo has been slotted into that midfield, they're looking very good. They all seem to complement each other. We were obviously skeptical whether Redondo can have that athletic impact on this midfield, because we obviously need to cover for Busquets, but I think is just shaping up to be really balanced as of now. And you don't want to change or mess that up when things are going well. So I think for the foreseeable future, to answer your question, as long as this midfield continues to perform the way it's been doing, I don't see Julian Gressel getting his place back, at least in that middle three. But I think with Messi potentially missing out a few games, that would put the onus on Gressel to fulfill that number 10 playmaker position from the right wing position. So I think there's definitely still place for Julian Gressel, but as of now, the way the midfield's looking, it might not be in that middle three.
And listen, he's going to start in the midfield next weekend because, as we mentioned, both Federico Redondo and Diego Gomez and David Ruiz are all going to be on international duty. So that midfield's going to take a pretty nice hit with in terms of the depth. But so maybe he'll earn his spot back next week with a great performance. Campana gets the start. Suarez, he got rotated last weekend, but he played at least the majority of the games against Nashville in both legs. Were you surprised to see him not start? I mean, he has been phenomenal. You'd think going on the road in an MLS game, especially if you're doing rotation elsewhere, you might want to get him a rest. Hard to complain with the final result, but was that a surprise to you going in?
Yeah, for sure. I expected Luis Suarez to start just because he obviously is not going away on international duty. We've got a bit of a break.
Can I ask you a question along those lines? Do you think that was a comment on Luis Suarez and him needing a little bit of a break, or Campana being good enough to demand minutes?
There are a couple of things to that. I think, yes, Campana is good enough to demand the minutes, and I think he warrants a start, and he proved that with his goal. But also, you want to keep your second striker fresh and ready for when Luis Suarez might be out for an extended period. So I think that was definitely a thinking that Tata Martino is going with in terms of picking this lineup. And I think having Campana start a few games where potentially we don't have as much of a consequence in terms of the result, but then the possibility of having Luis Suarez come in off the bench would be essential. I think this was one of the games where Tata Martino got it right, in the sense that I think Campana started the game. He started the game well, and you just want to keep him fresh and going. You don't want him to sit on that bench and go stale. Keep him on the toes. So that was a good decision by Tata Martino.
Yeah, it obviously worked out really well. The reason I bring that up is because Suarez played seemingly 85 to 90 minutes of every game last year for Gremio. So even though we've heard all about the knee, and even though we've heard all about how he's old and aging and falling apart, he seemed to put in plenty of minutes last year in Brazil. So I kind of just figured he'd be locked in as a starter, maybe get one game if we're playing 4 in 2 weeks. But other than that, I thought he would be good to go.
Yeah,
but let's get into the game.
I don't know if
Go ahead.
you heard, I think it was Taylor Twellman's comment, but apparently Luis Suarez's knees have not been working since 2016, and he has had that limp since. So, you know what? That was his highest scoring season for Barcelona. So if he can produce something similar from Inter Miami, he can limp on both feet if he wants to.
It sounds to me like his knees are working just like they're supposed to, just because it looks weird. And, they look like they're working fine. Okay, let's get into the game. Obviously, a very hot start for DC United. Inter Miami did not come out of the gates hot. They didn't come out well at all. Some turnovers. They just really struggled to keep possession. And with that high press of DC, we were kind of playing into their hands, and we weren't taking advantage like our team is capable of with our talent. It led to the breakthrough in the 14th minute. Jared Stroud sort of sits patiently along the back line, waits for the in ball, gets lost between Noah Allen and Frede, gets the ball, turns, fires a nice shot. I don't want to take anything away from him, but nothing Callender could do. But I'm sure you have some thoughts on this goal.
Yeah, we're going to dissect it obviously in detail, but most of the attack that DC United was creating was from that left side with Allen and Avilés, and I think a couple of minutes before that, Benteke got in a really good opportunity as well, and it seemed like they weren't necessarily picking up the spaces, and I mean Allen and Avilés were not picking up the spaces in between them, and Benteke and then Stroud were finding a lot of joy in between and were just able to stand there and receive the ball, which eventually led to the goal. So poor defending. The tactics weren't exactly on point at this point in the game, but yeah, DC United was just, they started off much quicker and they were targeting that left side. So at that point, I felt that this was going to potentially be a bit of a drubbing.
Yeah, I didn't mention the Christian Benteke opportunity. In fact, I think he had 2 or 3. So they deserved a goal at that point because Inter Miami was not playing well. They were turning the ball over and or going deep for nothing. Talk to me about what Miami's structure and plan was to come into this game, and that led to this poor start. And
I'm not sure if this is what Tata Martino intended, but the way Miami was playing in that first 10, 15 minutes, they were trying to build through the middle, or at least that's what I saw. I think they were trying to get Redondo on the ball, they were trying to get Busquets on the ball, and then try and get in behind the high line, much like they did against Orlando, which did not work against DC United. I think from what I saw, there was obviously a lot of possession lost very easily. Redondo had he had a bit of a space to run when he got the ball, but we were turning the ball sloppily in the midfield, which gave DC United the chance to run on the transition. And we discussed this in our preview as well, that it's going to be a game that's going to be full of offensive transitions. And if you don't keep the ball, it's going to give DC United the chance to break on us. And that's what they were doing. And I feel like we didn't exploit the wide spaces enough. We were pushing more through the central spaces and they just clogged it up, turned the ball over, and then got onto the attack very quickly. So that's where I think we were struggling in that first 15 minutes.
that's not really how I saw it, actually. I thought the back line was instructed to just bypass the midfield and get the ball forward to Campana and to Robert Taylor in a sort of just a direct long ball kind of way. And it just led to turnover after turnover. I mean, we didn't connect on anything. And so, yes, they played a few passes to the midfield, and the midfield wasn't in a great spot to take advantage of that. But I thought the back line was instructed from the very beginning to kind of play the ball direct to the front line. And there actually wasn't a lot of trying to build through the midfield, where we have the talent and depth, or the talent and skill to build through the midfield. But we weren't trying to do that early on. And yes, I know Busquets came back and had a few of those direct balls too, but it wasn't like it was a direct style, and we just couldn't connect on anything in order for us to get forward. And that's why I felt DC was just crushing us, because they had that really high press that was making those direct balls really difficult.
Yeah, and that's the question I have for you. Do you think that long ball was something that was instructional from Tata Martino, or was it because we were unable to build from the back? Because that was my point. I think we were trying to build from the back, go through the center of the midfield. We're not able to do that. And then when that didn't happen, we just lobbed it up front, got Campana on the ball as soon as we could. And then that would just lead to, whoever got the second ball. And in the first 15 minutes, it was mostly DC United. So do you think that was an instructional change, or was that something that we were unable to do because of our inability to play out from the back, and that's why we were going long?
I'd have to rewatch the game getting that second watch when you're not in the emotion of the game is always helpful. But I thought that was their tactic from the beginning. I thought they were like, we're just going to bypass this press. You guys are going to play high. There's going to be lots of space in behind. We like Robert Taylor. We think that if you can get Julian Gressel on the ball up the field with not a ton of defenders around him, he can make big plays, and they feel good about Campana being a target man. So I thought that was their strategy right away. And I thought the way they got out of that was relying on the midfield to get into better positions so that they could receive the ball and kind of play through the midfield as a consequence. And I think that's what really changed after that first 15, 20 minutes, where our midfield stopped being sort of ancillary to the solution and started being the solution, where they were getting good positions, not just to receive the ball from the defense, but to advance the ball from that point, which I think is indicative of a tactic change after 15 minutes, where Tata goes, or maybe it's just Busquets or the guys on the field, they go, listen, this isn't working. Let's fix this. And ultimately, the big thing that really changed things was those crosses from the right side across the field to the left side. And Busquets had one, Tota Aviles had one. I think David Ruiz had one or two. So that's what really opened up the game, I think. But at the beginning, it was us just playing the ball forward, and then what changed was Busquets and Redondo being available options that helped us break through that press. That's what I saw, at least.
Yeah, I saw something similar, not exactly the same, but something very similar. I think the tactical change that helped us was the fact that we started using the wide channels a lot more. And not in terms of running through the wide channels, but in terms of switching the cross ball fields that we were the cross field balls, that we were using after the first 15 minutes really helped us bypass that press. And I agree with you that a lot of that was a result of either Redondo or Busquets receiving the ball in the right area with space to then put it out either to Robert Taylor or Julian Gressel, and both of them had plenty of chances to get on the ball in that wide area because there was just so much space. So yeah, I saw something very similar in the sense that I think the wide channels became a lot more the focal point of the attack, and that's how we got most of the joy in trying to get that goal.
Well, let's move on because we'll talk more about tactics a little bit later. But it's the 24th minute that we equalized. Campana has a nice header from Robert Taylor that he puts on target, but a nice save by the keeper. But it sort of cycles out, and Redondo gets on the ball. He falls once, he gets back up, he keeps dribbling. He falls a second time, doesn't stop him. He makes a little toe touch pass to Campana, who just runs into it and fires and puts in the back of the net to tie the game. 24th minute. Talk to me about that play.
That was all
name
Redondo.
of this, The name of this episode is Goofy Goals, and that's where it started because that was a fun one.
I don't think that was a goofy goal compared to the third goal that we scored. I think that was complete grit and passion. Like, Redondo just did not give up. And kudos to him. I don't think he's athletically fast, but I think he's strong. He's deceptively strong, actually. And I've seen this a few times in this game and the previous game, where he really pushes against his defenders and, holds the ball really well and runs with it. And that's what he did this time around. There are a few times where he could have just gone down and, taken the free kick, where he just did not give up, somehow got the ball to Campana, and the first time finish was actually really, really good for someone who hasn't played that many minutes. So loved it for Campana, great finish from him, but I think that goal was entirely Redondo's created.
Yeah, it's a great moment, and I'm sure we'll talk about Redondo more when we give out awards at the end of the episode. But Inter Miami ties it 1-1. They have sort of stemmed the tide of this DC press. It felt like by this point they had sort of overcome it, and it didn't feel like it was going to go back to a game that DC wanted or what they had in the first 15 or so minutes. The last big moment I want to talk about in this first half was the potential penalty on a set piece where Busquets pulls the shirt of a DC United player. Foul or no for you?
Yeah, I think that's a penalty. I think that's more of a penalty than the other shot that DC United fans have been going for. We'll talk about that second instance, but there was an opportunity for Dajime to get onto the ball, and the pull that Busquets had on his shirt prevented him from getting onto the ball and getting his head on the ball. So clear goal scoring opportunity stopped. I think that was a penalty, or at least there was a shout for a penalty.
Can I ask you a question? Did you think he was offsides? Because that's what I've been thinking every time I look at the replay, is that this player's offsides. And so even if he gets on the ball, it's not going to count as a goal anyways. He had already sort of disqualified himself. And that
I
wasn't
didn't
a
actually
talking
check
point.
that.
That hasn't been a talking point in this whole discussion. And
Yeah.
it's surprising to me because I think he's offsides in the first place. But
yeah, he might actually be. Wait, I'm just gonna have a look because I've got the highlights open right now, but I actually didn't see if he was offside or not. And he may potentially be, but I think just by the virtue of the foul itself, that I think was a penalty. But if he's offside, then he's offside. So then it wouldn't count as a foul.
There was one other moment in the first half, and I didn't write it down the time, but there's a beautiful cross from Sergio Busquets to Robert Taylor that Robert Taylor runs under and then just puts it a little wide, hits the crossbar. I just want to mention it because that was just pure class from Sergio Busquets.
That was absolutely stunning. Like, that was vintage Busquets, and class is permanent because the way that ball just fell into Robert Taylor's foot, I don't even know how you do that. It wasn't floated, it wasn't skidded across the ground, it was a mixture of both, and he just had to run in on it. And unfortunate that he shot the post. And yeah, it was beautiful and a cross that deserved to be finished off with a goal.
Yeah. Unfortunate not to put that on target, but we go into the half 1-1, which, considering how we started, it was something I think we were both satisfied with, and I think we both felt at halftime that Inter Miami should go out and win this game. But the second half wasn't as satisfying as I thought it should have been. It felt like the game really opened up for a long time there, where the midfield became non-existent. The space between the front and back lines for both teams was just the whole field. And those games are always scary for me if you're in a tied game, because any team can score a goal in that type of situation. There's no control of the game. And fortunately, well, before that, in the 70th minute, Christian Benteke gets an opportunity. He puts it about 6 inches over the crossbar. There was nothing Callender could have done about that, but just pray that it went over, and that's exactly what happened, which is, a minute and a half before Inter Miami gets their second goal. We'll talk about the potential handball in a second, but the ball gets cleared. It goes to Redondo. Gressel finds Redondo. Redondo finds Campana. Campana puts it in for Luis Suarez, who drags his feet and puts in the back of the net to give Inter Miami the lead. Tell me about that goal before we go to the handball.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what that second goal was, but I was just thinking something else about Christian Benteke. I think that was the only one chance that the clear chance that he had apart from the first couple of minutes. I think after that 15-minute assault that DC United had, I don't think Christian Benteke was that threatening throughout the rest of the game. So we'll talk about that for sure, but yeah, kudos to the defense for keeping pace with him. And then I think I completely agree with you. The second half was very, very open, and it was very much like the Orlando City game, but just this time DC United was more of a threat by virtue of keeping the ball better. And I think it worked out in our favor because a player like Redondo had so many spaces, he had so much space to run into a fair few times, and that's how the second goal came. He got the ball in the midfield, ran with it, made a really good pass to Campana, who had an even better pass to Suarez, and just an easy goal tucked in.
It's one of those really beautiful, simple goals that can be so hard for teams to pull off when everything's going wrong. But when everything's going right, it just looks easy, simple, and but we know that it's not. So kudos to everyone on that play for making it happen. So the handball, yes or no for you?
No, not a handball. Go on.
I agree. Not a handball. Yeah. In no way is that a handball in any league unless the refs are actually bought off. It's just not.
There are a couple of things to that in terms of rules, and I'm by no means an expert on the official rules because they change so often. It hit his leg and then hit his hand. B, his hand was not in an unnatural position, and C, he was using that hand to protect himself while he was going to ground. So by those three measures, it was not a handball. Obviously, DC United fans are going to scream handball because we scored literally 2 seconds later. So it's harsh for them, but that was not a handball.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I could celebrate the goal because I had seen the handball shouts from the DC players, leading up to the fast break. But I agree. Once you see the replay, no way is it a handball, and the goal should count for sure. Okay, let's get to the third goal where Inter Miami sort of puts it away. It's in the 85th minute. Diego Gomez with an incredible defensive play causes the turnover, starts a fast break. He finds Luis Suarez. Luis Suarez looks like he fumbles it, but he turns around and just chips it over the keeper. You're right. It was a goofy goal, but it counts all the same. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, that was a comedy of errors that worked in our favor. So glad it ended up in the net because it completely changed the complexion of the game. Again, this was made by Diego Gomez. So well done in terms of his pressure and in terms of getting that ball off of, I think it was Chris McVeigh that he got it off of. And then just laying it off to Suarez. I thought that he might actually run and try and score this himself, but obviously he didn't get the enough pace on the defenders who were still with him. So he passed it off to Luis Suarez, who I thought should have shot earlier, where he sort of let that chance go, and I was like, oh, damn it, all the hard work's done here. And then he just chips it. The audacity of him to just chip the keeper. And at that point, you're just wondering, these boys just seem to be having fun playing football at this age. Like, I would never have expected him to chip it from that angle. And I think the keeper should have done better and maybe he could have saved it. But yeah, it ended up going into the net and 2 goals in 15 minutes on the pitch. Could have had a hat trick. So well done to Luis Suarez.
Yeah, Bono, the keeper, he mistimed his first jump and he tried to like reset himself, and then he just didn't time it well. But all goals count the same. La Ventanita on Twitter had an amazing tweet about how goals are like babies; they're all beautiful, and your babies are the most beautiful. So I loved it. I thought it was one of the most fun goals of the year. But yeah, great goal.
And listen, if the keeper hadn't got a hand to it and if it had gone in straight, that would have been a contender of the goal contender of the week at least. It was really well shot. He did he did everything right. So no shame in scoring that.
Last two probably not noteworthy moments. Jordi Alba gets a nice opportunity and puts a shot on goal. It's sort of right at the keeper. And then before that, Schneider Borgelin has a nice touch on a through ball, gets a dog so penalty. DC United lose a man. I can't remember his name right now, but they lose the man in the 90th minute. I thought we might get another goal at that point, but not to be. Game ends 3-1. Give me your thoughts on DC.
Yeah, it was Pedro Santos who got sent off. And just to come back to Schneider Borgelin, I think this is the role that he's going to play in this team for the rest of the season. Just get sent on towards the last few minutes of the game and just be a menace. And he's so big and clunky when he runs. And it's so hard for defenders to deal with, especially at the 89th minute where they ran their butts off to try and secure a win. And then you have Borgelin, who's like 6 feet something, coming onto the pitch, running like a bulldozer. So well done to him for finding that space, running into space, and then getting that red card. But after the third goal, I was just sitting back and enjoying the game. I wasn't even analyzing what was going on. It was just fun. So overall, a good game. But in terms of DC United, I think they started off really well. They definitely deserved that goal, maybe even a couple. Their tactics were really good at the start. I don't know if it was Miami who didn't have their tactics right, or it was DC who got their tactics. Sorry, it was Miami who didn't have their tactics on point, or DC who was actually forcing them to play that way. But yeah, they played really well for the first 15 minutes, but then I think they were really naive after that first goal. because this felt like another game, another Orlando game that we had where we scored 5 goals against them. You can't go and be so open against this Inter Miami team. And I know they like DC likes to play on the offensive transitions, but if you give this Miami team that much space, they're going to make you suffer. And I think we discussed this in our preview as well, that there are going to be chances, and whoever scores most of their chances is going to win this game. And Miami has the quality to do that. So, um,
Yeah, before we move on from Schneider Borgelin, because I don't think we're going to talk about him later, I know we one of the big talking points of Luis Suarez coming and Leo Campana being here was what can Leo Campana learn from Luis Suarez, and maybe we didn't spend enough time thinking about what Schneider Borgelin might learn from Luis Suarez, because certainly a more raw player, but has some really impressive physical tools, and so it'll be interesting to see how he lives with that and tries to make an impact on this team. Troy Lesesne, he's the new DC United coach. They got 5 points from their first 3 games, including 2 road draws and a home win. So it was a good start for them. He comes over from the New York Red Bulls. He's been a coach for the Red Bulls as an interim. He was a coach in the USL. This is his first time in the MLS as the guy. I thought he had the right tactics. He knew exactly what they should do to start this game, but I just don't think that team has the talent to keep up with it. Even without Lionel Messi, this Inter Miami team has so much talent, and that energy, high press soccer, it's really going to struggle if you can just play around it.
yeah, we spoke about quality in our pregame review, and it's shown through. I think Inter Miami had the better players on the pitch, even without Messi, and then we had the better players coming off the bench as well. But I don't want to discount DC United. They played really attractive football, at least for long periods of that game, and they were doing well. They had an attacking threat, but I think their gegenpressing style and their high press intensity style was sort of after that first goal, it just petered off. And if you don't do it if you don't do that high pressing with the full intensity, and if it's half-hearted, and if not all players are bought into that, then it's going to fall apart very quickly. And I think that's what happened when we started seeing so much of the spaces, especially in that second half, with a lot of their attacking players pushing far up, their defenders staying further back, and there was just this massive gap in the midfield, which they could which Inter Miami could easily exploit. And Inter Miami has been culpable for that particular tactics before. We've had the same mistakes in some of our previous games, especially in the preseason, and we knew that if we left those spaces, DC United could punish us. But I think we just had the better quality on the ball, and we were able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, if you're going to play that style against a team with as much quality as we have, you got to be in their grill all day. And once we started hitting a few of those long balls, the defense got a little concerned. The goalkeeper, and I don't know if you noticed this, but the first 15 or 20 minutes, the goalkeeper was playing really high up just to protect that back line. And then he started sitting back, and the defense started sitting back, and the midfield didn't seem like they knew what they should be doing, because the front 3 was still in this, pressing, the front 2, I guess, was still pressing like they did at the beginning of the game. So it just sort of all fell apart. I don't think Troy Lesesne will be happy with his team's performance, even, despite the loss, just how they played and how they responded to a little bit of adversity. I think you wanted to talk about how that style against this Inter Miami team is going to be maybe not the most successful. And it's probably worth talking about because our next game is against the New York Red Bulls.
Yeah, I think we've seen it twice now against Orlando, as we've already mentioned, and now against DC United, where teams that come up with a high intensity pressure style, and even against Galaxy at some points, but Galaxy was a lot more compact. I think teams that leave the spaces and play a high line and are not as compact and don't play with a low block will suffer against this Inter Miami team, because this team has grown into the season to be able to keep the ball better. We're not turning the ball over as much, and we've just got the passing capabilities to bypass that high intensity, high press, especially if you're playing a really high line. This Inter Miami team struggles when you are compact, you're low block, and you turn the ball over and then charge at them. So play on the counter instead of trying to win the ball high up and then create your offensive tactics. But I think the blueprint for playing against teams that have that high press, high line is play the 4-3-3. And that might actually be one of the reasons that Tata Martino went for that 4-3-3, because um, you're just able to exploit that high line a lot better and have your front three run in behind the defenders and exploit the high line, as I said. I'm not sure if you agree with it, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I think that's the blueprint playing against such a high line.
I don't think it's about a high line or a low block. I think it's about the compactness of your team from front to back. Every player that's going to start on the front line for this team, whether it's Messi, Suarez, Campana, Robert Taylor, Julian Gressel, if we bring in Matias Rojas, probably him as well, they are all goal threats. And that's not every team in the MLS is going to start a front line full of goal threats, but everyone on our front line can score. And so that's a problem. But if you have the talent in the midfield like we have, they're going to get those goal scoring opportunities. And so what you really need to do is shut down the midfield. And so it's that you're just not letting those opportunities come back, and you're making it difficult if any of those front three do try to come back for the ball, like we see with Messi specifically, to try and make plays when he comes back for it. So I think it's more about the compactness of the lines and then how narrow you play, especially defensively. To me, those are the two keys to beating Inter Miami. And I think that was something that you mentioned, the LA Galaxy. I thought they did that really well. They were really well disciplined in defense, and that's why we struggled so much to create opportunities in that game. This was the opposite, where yes, they played a high line, but they played the defenders, the back line was so far back that there was just so much space. Our midfield just played right through it, and our front three were getting in good spots to punish them for it. So I agree. I think it's going to be more about the discipline of the team and being disciplined front to back and compact, and that has to be their tactics. But to me, that was the difference in this game, and some of the other big results that Inter Miami's gotten so far this season. Okay, let's talk about the 4-3-3. It's back. I know you just mentioned it. When we talked about the lineup, we talked about how it's not exactly the same guys that were there in the first run of games this season, but it was something that we wanted to see. It was something that we brought back for this game. David Ruiz played it right back. What did you think of the setup compared to the 3-5-2 that we've seen recently?
One difference that I saw in terms of how we play in the 4-3-3 and how we play in the 3-5-2. I think sometimes in the 3-5-2 we look a little bit uncomfortable and unsure of what we're trying to do. That has improved over the last few games, but I think the players were not as well drilled in the 3-5-2. In the 4-3-3, even after we went behind, it felt like the players knew what they wanted to change within that 4-3-3 setup to be able to exploit the DC United defense and get in the right spaces. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway that I had from this game. At no point did I feel that the players were uncomfortable. I think after the first 15 minutes within that 4-3-3, we were able to switch up tactically really well. We knew where we wanted to be. We knew how we wanted to distribute the ball and where we wanted to exploit DC United, and we were able to do that really well. So I think it looked really good with a proper right back in place. I think it's going to look very solid. And the defense has always looked really good in the 4-3-3. And barring that first 15 minutes, I'd like to give a shout out to the defense because I think they did a really good job in trying to keep DC United at bay. Because they've got, I thought Benteke was going to score at least one, if not two. And whatever said and done, despite a couple of chances that he may have had, the backline did a really good job of defending against DC United's attacking threats. So I think the 4-3-3 has always been my preference with this team, and I'm glad that it's back. And I think it's just going to get even more robust once we get it right back in.
Let me tell you some top line statistics. We've played 4 games in the 4-3-3 this season. We've scored 11 and we've allowed 2. In 3 games in the 3-5-2, we've scored 7 and allowed 6. So in 4 games in the 4-3-3, a +9 goal differential. In the 3-5-2, it's a +1 goal differential. To me, this lineup is just, this formation is just so much more stable. It allows our midfield to be at their very best. It gives us 3 options up front to score goals, and it's more solid and organized defensively. Yes, it requires more effort from the fullbacks, and maybe Jordi Alba doesn't love that, but it's more structured and it's more balanced defensively as well. I hope we don't go back to it unless the personnel demands it. And it might next weekend because we won't have David Ruiz, and I don't think we'll have a new right back yet either. So we'll see it again probably next week. But I thought it was good to see that this team could do that. I thought it was good to see that this team could do that with David Ruiz as a right back. And it gave me good feelings about what we might be able to do moving forward.
For sure, I think that has to be our primary formation, and 3-5-2 should only come out when we need a tactical change. So we'll see.
Steve Munoz makes a good point. They did sort of come back to a slightly different formation at the end of the game, but that was after it was still 1-1 when they brought on Suarez. They took off Robert Taylor, so it became more of a 4-4-2 at that point, and then I think it was mostly a 4-4-2 actually.
I'll be honest though, in that second half, it didn't necessarily feel like there was a formation for either teams. There was just so much place to run into. I think players were just finding the ball and running into it. Like I can name 3 instances where Redondo got the ball and just ventured out and ran like 20 yards with it. So by that time, I think in the second half specifically, I think there was just too much space. And yeah, the formation was, you're right, like the 3-5-2 probably we ended with that, but it didn't really feel like it.
Yeah, you're right. Once we brought Jordi Alba and Borgelon on, it was a 3-5-2. But yeah, I think by that point in the game, it was so wide open and so unstructured that we didn't learn anything about the 3-5-2. Set pieces. This is something that we were really worried about in the pregame. They have a big set piece threat. They had plenty of corners. They got plenty of opportunities on set pieces based on fouls. What do you think of our set piece, how we handled the set pieces?
Yeah, the commentators at one point mentioned how Inter Miami should have conceded a few from set pieces, and every time DC United had the ball in the corner or got a free kick, we heard about how Miami is vulnerable in set pieces and how DC United is so good in set pieces and how Benteke should probably score this. I think we did really well. Big shout out to Drake Callender because I think he commanded his box fantastic in throughout the game. I think he came out when he needed to. He was organized and he went up for the ball, got the ball, did really well. There was a free kick that he parried away really well as well. That was threatening. I think overall, big thanks to him for commanding the box and making sure that DC didn't score on that on the set pieces. Secondly, I think the back line needs to be commended. They were switched on. They focused throughout the game, and there were a couple of instances where DC could have scored from a header coming in from a corner, maybe even a free kick. But other than that, I think overall we were very disciplined in our defense, and we dealt with the aerial threat really well, especially considering how weak we've been in the past with the set pieces.
Yeah, I think the team only had one training session between the Nashville game and this game, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was a primary focus for them. And you're right, they had, I think, 7 or 8 corners, plenty of set-piece opportunities, and I don't think any of them ended up being particularly dangerous. The 2 or 3 really nice chances that Nashville got in this game, I'm thinking about the Benteke opportunity early, the Benteke header late, and then the one they did score on. None of them were off set pieces. So I think the team did well. And, obviously, even if you're bad at set pieces, that doesn't mean you're going to give up a goal every game, but it's a step in the right direction. And I agree that Callender was a big part of it. Well, we'll talk about Callender maybe in the awards section, but let's talk about the midfield. They have built some really good chemistry. I think they look as good as we've had a midfield maybe ever. I mean, it's still early for us to say this is the best Inter Miami midfield ever, but they have the talent and it's starting to really click.
Yeah, I think there are three players in there with three different profiles who complement each other really, really well. I think Diego Gomez has turned up this season and been like, you know what, I'm going to be the star of this midfield. We've got Redondo come in, who's absolutely unafraid. I think he's really fit in over the last 3 games. He's been with us, what, 3 games now, four games now? And he's really fit in well. And I think he's confident on the ball. He does his job. He's clean and tidy in possession. He's good with his passing as well. Not afraid to run with the ball either. So I think a really good fit into that midfield. And then Sergio Busquets finally coming into his own, I think, turning the ball over less. We saw a glimpse of his absolute um, his footballing genius with that one pass that he had to do to Robert Taylor in that first half. And I think he's just coming into his own even more as the season progresses. So I think overall, we've got these three pieces that are working really well, that are complementing each other, and I think are growing comfortable and learning each other's game as well. So in that sense, this midfield has started to look really, really good. Obviously, we're going to have a few more players come back from injury. We've got Benjamin Kramaski coming in. Maybe we have Gressel fitting into this midfield somehow. So there's going to be a change, at one point during the season. Obviously, we're not going to have these three available throughout across the entire season. But a lot of promise in terms of not just these three midfielders, but also the depth that we have in the midfield.
Yeah, I think the thing that let me stop. Last season, our best midfield was Kramaski, Sergio Busquets, and Dixon Arroyo. And it was a nice blend of defensive solidity from Arroyo, Busquets having some really world-class ability to progress the ball and to just get us out of sticky situations. And then Kramaski is a really athletic, physical, demanding, pesky player with some final third product. And so I'm trying to compare this midfield to that. And well, I think Busquets has had a little bit of a slow start to the season. He's really gotten better over the last couple of games. Federico Redondo is maybe not as defensive-minded as Dixon Arroyo, but he has those chops, and he's really grown into this league over the last couple of games, and I imagine it's only going to get better. And then he's a much bigger presence going forward. He's much better on the ball. He's much less turnover prone. He's more technical. He's less turnover, he's less turnover prone. And then Kramaski, I love Kramaski, but Diego Gomez has been phenomenal. He's been more pesky, more of a menace in that midfield than Kramaski has been, or at least was last season. And then now he started to add that final third product. He makes good runs. He's been a lot more precise over the last so far this season. And so I think this is really becoming a monster of a midfield that we've got, and I love it. And I think today was another step in that direction. Playing down the wide channels. I know that you mentioned this as one of the key factors that turned this game around in the first half, but maybe you can talk to me more about what Miami did.
Yeah, I think the biggest change that I saw from my end was getting Robert Taylor and Julian Gressel involved in the game. I think in the first 20 minutes, we weren't finding those spaces that were so widely available on the wings. And when we started getting better was when Sergio Busquets and Redondo started to spread those balls out wide, whether it was through cross-field switches or whether it was in attack or offensive transitions, just getting the ball wide, spreading out the DC United backline as well. I think there were so many chances where we had Robert Taylor on the ball. He cut in and was able to either put in a cross or go for attack himself. So I think it became a lot more promising in attack once we started to find those players. Julian Gressel had a couple of chances to put balls in, but there was so much space in the wide on the wide areas and in the wings that I'm glad we saw that after the first 15 minutes and were able to make the most of those channels, because that was the key to getting that first goal, and then after that just dominating the game.
Yeah, we talked about in the pregame how this team really does a lot better when they can spread the opposing defense wide. And they do even better against teams that try to push their fullbacks forward. And so there was just so much space and so much opportunity wide. And, the DC center backs didn't have the athleticism or quality to cover that. And I think you're exactly right. Once we were getting the ball in those wide channels, we really opened up the game. And it was just a matter of having the individual quality to finish our chances. But at that point, once we sort of found that out, I thought there's no way we should lose this game. I thought that was the difference. And I think that was good to point out for you. Before we get into our individual awards, just one big picture question, and it's probably one we've talked about a lot already. It's probably one we're going to talk about a lot all season. This is our second game without Lionel Messi. How are you feeling?
Very, very promising. I think this team is looking really good, and the fact that we can go out and beat DC United away from home in a promising manner speaks volumes for where this team is at and where it can get. I'd like to point out Steve's comment here that there are more players yet to come back. Of course, we've got Negri's coming back next week, Benjamin Kremaski, and a few others coming in, Ian Frey as well. This team is only going to get better. I think there's so much potential, even without Messi. I think there are so many attacking threats and dangers in this team that I think that the only way is up. So it's all looking very promising. The midfield setup is looking really well and solid. There are attacking threats. We've got Robert Taylor, who's coming into good form. Luis Suarez is obviously having a fantastic season so far. Campana's getting a few goals as well. So I think overall everything just seems to be clicking. And Messi or not, there seems to be a party every weekend. So hopefully that continues longer.
I'm trying to think of what the difference is between last year and this year. I know we didn't win last week without Messi, but it felt like a game that we probably could have or should have won. And, Montreal took their chances, but I think we had the better overall run in that game. But last season, there was definitely a huge drop-off without Messi, where the team just wasn't able to be effective without him, at least in terms of getting results. I think Campana went on a nice little heater right after the Leagues Cup, and that brought us another couple points. But other than that streak for Campana, we really struggled. And to me, I'm thinking what's the difference? And I don't think it's the midfield as much as I think it's the final three, the front three, and what we do in the final third. Robert Taylor is in good form, but he was playing similarly last season. Julian Gressel is a new player, but he hasn't been a difference maker in the front three. Is it just Luis Suarez who's come in and just been so dynamite, so good that he's just powered the goal scoring operation for this team, and then the rest of the team can just do what they do?
Obviously, it's great having a number 9 who can finish off his chances and score some fantastic goals. That's always a positive, and create as well. Yeah, correct. But I think a big factor of why Inter Miami is where it's at right now in this season is everyone seems to have bought in, obviously, to what Inter Miami is about, but also everyone seems to know their role. It doesn't seem like that everyone seems to be well positioned, there are a few players like David Ruiz who might be played out of position, but even then, they know exactly what to do and how they want to do it. And it seems like a team performance. You lose together, you win together, and it just seems like all the pieces are finally starting to come together. There's no one single person that's standing out. Of course, we have one game where Diego Gomez is going to do fantastic, another game where Luis Suarez or Redondo or every player is having their stay on this particular lineup, which I think is a big factor. Everyone seems to be playing themselves into form right now, and having 11 players who can make some sort of a difference. We saw Jordi Alba, who almost took the game by the neck against Montreal and said, I'm going to be the difference. And then in the next game, we had Diego Gomez against Nashville. So it seems like everyone seems to be relishing their responsibilities and their roles and doing what they're supposed to. And that just lifts the entire team altogether. So I think, yes, having a number 9 helps, but it's a team effort, and everyone's just seemed to be coming together at this point, at least.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right answer. There's probably more talent on this roster and in the on the field than there was last season. I really like Dixon Arroyo as a defensive midfielder, but guys like Redondo, they just have more ability to impact games in a positive way. Diego Gomez is not the same player he was last season. So I think you're probably right. I think it's just an upgrade across the board. And even the same players as last year have taken their talent to a new level. So exciting stuff. And it's really nice to see that we're not so reliant on our superstar. Let's get into awards. I went first last time. So it's your turn to go first this time. Who was your man of the match for Miami?
There are a few contenders. I don't think anyone was terrible. Uh, Everyone was good in, fulfilling their roles. But for me, Federico Redondo really shone in this game, and I think I'd like to give him that man of the match, despite the fact that Luis Suarez came on and scored 2 goals. He can keep doing that, but I think Redondo had a fantastic game. He did not shy away from getting on the ball, as we've seen. He had a few really good runs, and I'm just trying to look at his statistics. He had 1 assist, 69 touches. He had an 85% pass accuracy. He had 5 long balls, of which 3 were successful, 3 dribble attempts, and all were successful. And not just his contributions in attack, but defensively as well. He had 7 out of 9 ground duels won. Aerially, he was sound as well. And he just did everything all across the pitch. He had 3 tackles as well. So I think he had an overall all-round performance. And he was good defensively, he was good offensively, and definitely one of his best performances for Inter Miami so far. So I would give that to him.
Yeah, he was phenomenal in this game. I think, if it wasn't for the fact that Luis Suarez scored 2 goals, that this would be like an obvious answer. I went and looked it up. He is the 3rd most expensive 6/8 in MLS history. I think Michael Bradley for Toronto was a little bit more back in 2013, 2014. And then Evander for Portland was a little bit more expensive. But this guy was brought in to be a star. I mean, that's what his price demanded. That's what the hype is for him. And, we saw him do some things in the first game. We saw some flashes in the first couple games, but this game, I think he really put his mark on the game. He sort of dominated in a way that you'd expect for a player that cost that price. And if he's elevating himself to that level, he's going to be really special for not just the future, but this team.
And the first goal was all him. We were under the cosh before that first goal. So he just went out. He was like, you know what? I'm just going to run with the ball, not let anyone stop me. And he could have easily given up after that first foul or, first time he was brought to the ground. But he just kept going and made that goal for Campana. So I think he really had a massive effect in this game from start to finish. So definitely a standout performer for me. But that's not to say that others didn't perform well. I think Diego Gomez had a fantastic game as well. Obviously, Luis Suarez.
Hold on,
Okay.
hold on. We have awards to give out. Okay,
Okay,
let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But yeah, Redondo, phenomenal. He had a great game, and I'm more excited about him after this game than I was after any of the previous games, and what he can do in that midfield. Okay, why don't you introduce our next award while I figure out who I have to give it to?
All right, so the next award that we have is the traditional Heron That Flew North award. And for those of you who are listening to us for the first time, Florida herons don't normally fly north; they fly south. So this is the award for someone who was doing something that he was not supposed to be doing and flying in the opposite direction to the rest of the team. So that being said, Scotty, who is your heron that flew north?
Just for the sake of accuracy, Florida herons don't fly anywhere for the winter.
Okay, there you go.
But they certainly don't fly north. I'm giving it to Nicholas Frede. I know there were some calls for another player, but to me it was Frede. It's hard for me to give it to him because I don't like to add insult to injury, but he was part of that first 15 minutes where DC created a few chances. I think he had a few turnovers, and he wasn't a part of the really fun part of this game where Inter Miami was doing really well. And that was because of the injury, and I'm sure he would have stepped up. But I actually thought Sergei Kristoff came in and did a better job in that role than both on set pieces and in the run of play than I saw from Ferreira in the first 31 minutes before he came off. So to me, if I have to give this award to anyone, especially after a road win, I'm going to give it to Nico Ferreira.
I think that's super harsh. We did not get to see enough of him to actually build into the game. He got, subbed out in the 30th minute, I believe. But even then, I would have gone with either Aviles or Noah Allen, because the first goal that came, or the majority of the attacking threat that DC had in that first half, came down that left side, with both of them being culpable for a lot of the spaces that were being left in that position. I think Noah Allen he literally fits this award, because at times he was found in spaces that he wasn't supposed to be. I think his positioning was really off in that first few minutes. So I think, as much as we didn't see enough from Ferrer to actually warrant that award. So I think that was slightly harsh, but I do think, at least at the start of the game, it was Allen and Aviles who were not having the best game and were definitely getting beaten and getting exposed by the DC front line. So maybe they would have been a better shot, or someone I would have given it to.
I want to talk about Noah Allen for a second because you brought him up. He's a young player. He's a traditional left back, but he's played a lot of center back and a lot of wing back over the last couple months, and that's what he's been asked to do. And so this is a young player that's trying to develop at 3 different positions all at the same time, who's not a locked-in starter at any of them. And so I think that it's a little harsh to give him too much criticism because, yes, he was out of position a few times, but I just want to remind people this is a young player that's still developing, and he's trying to develop in new and different ways, and a lot of different ways at once, to make sure he can have an impact on this team. So I don't want to be as harsh on Noah Allen, and that's why I didn't give it to him, because I think he's a good player, and I think that he's just a young player that's having an inconsistent performance, but he's going to continue to improve.
Listen, I'm a big fan of Noah Allen. I really like him in that left centre back position. I think he's a good left back as well. He just didn't have a great game to begin with, at least. I think he grew into the game when Inter Miami sort of changed their tactics and got on the front foot. But I think to start with, he was a little bit unfocused. He was ball watching a few times where Benteke was just standing behind him and received the ball in his feet. I think he should have been closer to Arviles to switch, cut off those passing lanes. And yeah, he just wasn't, up to the mark in that first few minutes, but that can happen to any player. No harm, no foul. We scored 3 against the one that they scored, so his mistake is forgiven. But I'm sure he's going to have games where he's going to be much better than he was in this game. So
the other 2 things I want to say for Noah Allen is that I couldn't see most of his first half because he was in those shadows that I couldn't, my TV wasn't piercing through. But, and then the second part was this, he was also a part of the fun part of this game where things were going a lot better. So I gave him bonus points for that, even if he was finding himself in the wrong position early on. Okay, let's go to our individual awards. This is going to be where we give out 2 awards each, but we come up with a new award for every episode. And my first award is the All Roads Lead to Rome award. Any guesses?
do we have an Italian player?
No Italian players. Yannick Bright is half Italian.
All roads lead to Rome award. I don't know. Leo Campana?
It's Luis Suarez, because all roads lead to Luis Suarez winning us games or making a difference. He didn't start this game. He came off the bench, but he had the difference that made the game happen. 2 goals in 30 minutes or so. Once he came on, I felt like we were going to get the goal no matter what. And he just has filled me with so much confidence over the last couple of weeks. And he's becoming my favorite player in this team. He's so good. He impacts the game in so many ways. Even when he messes up, he still makes up for it with just pure quality. I love him, man. I love him so much.
I don't want to harp on too much about Luis Suarez because I can't physically support him as a Man United fan. It's against my DNA to go against that. But he's a fantastic player, and whatever said and done, I think he's at a point in his career where he's just having fun, and it's so good to see him just come on and do the things that he does. Like the audacity to try that chip over the keeper. I don't think any other player would do that in the MLS, and he's just enjoying his football, man, and it's really nice to see that. And he's still got so much to give. He's been one of the best players this season for Inter Miami. I think he's going to be fantastic going forward as well. So, yeah, kudos to him.
Yeah, one of the best parts for him this season has been his unselfishness and his playmaking ability. And I think that's starting to rub off on some of the other guys. You know, you talked about how Diego Gomez could have caused that turnover and then dribbled and tried to take a shot, but instead he lays it off for Luis Suarez in this case. We didn't see that pure unselfishness in this game, but I think is rubbing off on the team. I think he's not just good for the guys on the pitch and impacting games, but I think he's good for them off the pitch. I love everything about this man. I love it so much. And, you know, I saw him struggling in the preseason just like everyone else, but he has come so good and it's just so fun to watch.
Yeah, and I think you made a really good point earlier about how youngsters like Schneider Bogelin can learn from him. And it's not just his impact on the field, but also what he's going to teach some of these players off the field with his experience and his crazy mind that he sometimes brings to the football field. So I think he's a fantastic player. And I'm glad he plays for Inter Miami because if he didn't play for us, he'd be doing this for somebody else. And that would be a pain to watch. So.
Okay, what's your first award?
All right, my first award is Sorry, My Pockets Are Full award. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on who this would be.
I imagine that's Diego Gomez.
Nope.
Oh, okay. Who is it? My pockets
This
are
one
full.
is for Christoph because
Okay.
he absolutely pocketed Christian Benteke in that game. Apart from like the first few chances that Christian Benteke had when Christoph wasn't even on the pitch, I think after that he was fairly invisible. I didn't see him as threatening. I didn't think he was going to score at any point apart from that one header that he had maybe. But I think for someone like Christoph, who we've criticized in the past, and I know we thought that he might be the weak link, and I genuinely did not want him to start this game because I thought he would get rinsed by Christian Benteke. I would like to eat my words and say that, you know what? Yeah, when Christoph went home, he emptied his pockets, took out his wallet, his keys, and Christian Benteke. That was fantastic.
He took Benteke back with him to Miami before he even realized he left him in there.
Yep.
No, I think that's a great shout, man. I think that part that's why I went for Fred and my hair and that flew north because Christoph came on and was like a significant improvement. He's a good player. He doesn't always fit Inter Miami's system and what they want to do with the high line, but he's a really good player. And I think when it comes to facing experienced center backs that are big and strong and physical, I think he's a guy that you do want on the pitch in those situations.
Yeah, and I think another aspect of his game that we've not given him enough credit for is, at least in this particular game, he may not have been, outstanding in making the blocks or interceptions or whatever, but he kind of calmed the back line down. I think before he came on, it was a little bit all over the place. There were spaces in behind, but once he came on, I think his experience actually shone through, and he was able to organize the back line better. So well done to him, and I think he had a really good game, so he should be proud of that.
Okay, my next award is the Sixth Man of the Year award.
Oh, I want to get at least one of these right. So I'm trying to logically think through this. The sixth man of the year would mean someone who comes on and does the job when he's. I would have said Luis Suarez. Leo Campana.
It is Leo Campana. You know, unlike basketball where you can freely substitute players in and out, Leo Campana is going to be the guy that you bring off the bench and the guy that you bring in when you're rotating to impact the game. He's had 2 starts this season in that role. He's got 2 goals. He's got an assist. He's done exactly what you want from your striker when he's been given the starting, put in the starting lineup. I love Campana. I think he's one of the best strikers in the MLS, or a top 10 to 12 striker in the MLS. And he's a starter on so many teams in this league, and to see him do what he's done so far in sort of bit moments is really fun to see.
Yeah, no, I think he's been fantastic for the time that he's been on the pitch. He took his goal really well, great finish from him. But I think it's hard to be that striker who comes on as a substitute. I think it's really going to be important for Inter Miami to keep him fresh and fit and ready to, go as soon as he gets the chance. So seeing him have 2 starts and 2 goals, you just know he's got his firing boots on, which is great for us.
Yeah, we saw it for about 15 or so minutes in this game, but it was Campana and Luis Suarez on the field together in a front 2. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I really like that combination. I think obviously Campana had that assist for Luis Suarez and it worked really, really well. But even in the game before that, I forget which game we saw that in. I think maybe it was Nashville or Montreal. But they seem to have this chemistry. And I heard some post game comments from Campana as well that they seem to have been building some sort of a partnership together. So it'll be interesting to see how Tata utilizes them going forward in the season. I'm sure we're going to see more of them two playing together up top in a 4-4-2 maybe. So interesting.
Just to add some stats to this award, Leo Campana, a goal contribution every 71 minutes so far this season. He's now up to 25 goals for Inter Miami, which is him closing in on the all-time record. Gonzalo Higuain has 29. So it feels like Campana is, going to match and surpass that mark over the next couple weeks or months. And, I was worried he wasn't going to play much this year. And he's played more than I was expecting, at least once Suarez got going. And so it's good to see for a young, really talented player to not just get opportunities, but to do well in them.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, I think this team is starting to develop in terms of every player's roles. I think each player has a role to fulfill, and Campana's found his. So I'm hoping he can fit into that even more and contribute from whatever chance and minutes he gets.
Okay, let's hear your last award before we wrap it all up.
All right, my last award is If I Were Not a Footballer, I'd Be a Chef award.
Does this go to a player?
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking Chris Henderson for a minute there. Um, is this Diego Gomez?
No. This one goes to Sergio Busquets because he was absolutely cooking in that game. I think this was one of his best performances for Inter Miami this season. You could absolutely see the fantastic pass that he made to Robert Taylor and him getting back his confidence. And I think he's now starting to simmer and cook in that midfield. That's why I went with If I Were Not a Footballer, I'd Be a Chef. I think he's the one that's putting all those ingredients together. And I think with Redondo and Gomez in front of him, those are the ingredients that he's going to use to make the perfect dish that is Inter Miami. And I think as the season goes on, he's going to get even better. And hopefully he's going to put that preseason and first few games behind him.
I do like the award name. Yeah, he was good. He's been, in the first couple games of the season, he had a little bit of a turnover problem, but it seems like he's put that past him. He's in good form. And that was, I know you've been a little pessimistic on his performances of late, but he's coming good, man. And, of course he was always going to, but yeah, it's good to see.
Yeah, I'm also trying to make up for the fact that I gave him the Heron that Flew North award last time around. So I think I needed to make up for it. So this is Sergio Busquets' best game for us this season, and I'm sure it's gonna get better.
Yeah. Anyone else you want to talk about? Diego Gomez didn't get an award. He was my sort of backup option in case one of my first 2 got taken. But he was really good in the midfield. It's becoming sort of redundant to say, but he's like terrorizes opposing midfielders. He's in their face. He makes it so difficult for them to just be structured and to be like in an offense that actually makes sense because he's just a menace. Any thoughts on him before we wrap it up?
He's doing so well. I think you can see the progress in his game from each game on. I think he just finds a different level to his game every time. And yeah, we already know that he's really good at closing down the spaces and pressing and being aggressive. But I think he's starting to develop a more offensive mindset as well. I think coming after the pre-Olympics, he's full of confidence and he's not afraid to just take the ball and go with it. So this is becoming a really, really impressive player. And I think the sky is the limit for him. Other than Diego Gomez, I'd just also like to point out David Ruiz because I've been critical of David Ruiz in that right back position. I think he had a good game. I think he did really well. He was solid after a particular point, and I think he did well in a new position. And it's good to see him, develop into this role because he might not get a chance to play in the midfield, so he could potentially be a backup right wing back or a right back. And yeah, I think he had a decent game.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. He is, listen, he's never going to be a special right back, but this is the MLS, and can he be an MLS quality or an MLS standard right back? And, maybe he's not there yet, but maybe he can play into that after 10, 12 games there. And I think this was definitely a step in that direction. So yeah, good shout. He was solid today. Okay, that's it for our awards. We have done a lot of pregame, postgame episodes over the last couple of weeks just because the games have been coming quick and fast. But we have a week off in terms of Inter Miami games. We are still deciding if we're going to do a midweek episode, but we'll definitely be back for the pregame show at the hour before kickoff against the Red Bulls on Saturday. Till then, it's been a pleasure. My name's Scotty. This is Saur, and we'll see you next time.